of their victims. Their mottos did not include the words to save lives and protect. They were not running a mandatory program disguised as caring.
How many children? How many went to the wall in that decade of silence? How many presidents, Mr. Obama?
So that was the clip. It's by Autism Media Channel if you want to go look in some of the other clips that they have there. And that is owned by Andrew Wakefield, the former doctor from England. I have heard all the phone calls that were between Hooker and Dr. William Thompson. I knew about these phone calls before they were released. And Dr. Hooker had asked me if he could trust Wakefield. And I definitely think Wakefield is trustworthy. But the everyday layperson, their view of Wakefield is so erroneous. I begged Hooker to go to a different venue. Don't trust him. As far as being representative of media. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But he chose what he chose. Where we're at now is to get the Dr. William Thompson, the CDC whistleblower, to testify before Congress to the malfeasance that has happened at the CDC, the fraud, the cover-up, the experimentation. What they were talking about, the study, they've known about this since 2001. That is when the research started. And in the Atlanta area on African American boys. When I really sit here and think about it, it's overwhelming. I myself have a vaccine-injured child who almost died. My child, for the record, had 4 shots. In a February month, it was cold. Wind whipping around the corner of the building. And my child started screaming after the shots, of course. But her screams never stopped. She began to have seizures. This is within an hour, 2 hours of her vaccinations. My child is of mixed heritage. She's Kituwa Cherokee half. And then my half, French and English. Her intestines bled out. I didn't know she would make it that night. But I'm proud to report she did. And through hard work, therapy, and prayer, she is a wonderful, healthy child to this day. But it was a fight. So that's my personal reason for bringing this to you. I think it is... There are no words to know about harm to a certain minority as the president of the former president or head of the NIH. She started talking about a susceptibility group. And every time she talked about this, quote, susceptibility group, she was talking about the African American boys. She resigned her position over this, in my opinion, from her statement, which I can read her statement. I have it here. Well, let me scroll down just a little bit. Probably have to put my reading glasses on. Just take me a minute. And her name's Dr. Bernadine Healy, by the way. I'm looking for my reading glasses because I'm really going to need them. You're going to hear some noise. Excuse me. Here they are. Okay. Now I can read. This was a interview with Cheryl Atkinson. I think she's got her own show now. It was a 2008 interview. Now remember, they've known about this since 2001. And she had resigned, I believe, at this point. This is her statement, and it's a long one. This is the time when we do have the opportunity to understand whether or not there are susceptibility children. Now remember, susceptibility children, susceptibility population. We're talking about African American boys. That's what she's referring to. Going on, she said, I'll start over again. This is the time when we do have the opportunity to understand whether or not there are susceptibility children, perhaps genetically. Perhaps they have a metabolic issue, a mitochondrial disorder, immunological issue that makes them more susceptible to vaccines, plural, the multi-dose, or to one particular vaccine, or to one component of vaccines, like mercury. So we now, in these times, have to take another look at that hypothesis, not deny it. I think we have the tools today that we didn't have 10 years ago. This is 2008, and when did the research start? 2001. So she's talking about this study here. I think we have the tools today that we didn't have 10 years ago, that we didn't have 20 years ago, to try and tease that out and find out if there indeed is a susceptibility group. Why is that important? A susceptibility group, translation African American boys, does not mean that vaccines aren't good. What a susceptibility group will tell us is that maybe there is a group of individuals or a group of children that should not have a particular vaccine or should not have vaccines on the same schedule. I do not believe that if we identified a susceptibility group, that if we identified a particular risk factor for vaccines, or if we found out that we should be spread out a little longer, I do not believe that the public would lose faith in vaccines. It is the job of the public health community and of physicians to be out there and to say, yes, we can make it safer, because we are able to say, this is a subset, and we're going to deliver it in a way that we think is safer. I think the government or certain public health officials, Garabine, that's who she's referring to, in the government, have been too quick to dismiss the concerns of these families without studying the population that got sick, i.e. the African American boys. The public health officials have been too quick to dismiss the hypothesis as is irrational without sufficient studies of causation. I think they have been too quick to dismiss studies in the animal laboratory, either in mice and primates, that do show some concern with regard to certain vaccines, and also to the mercury preservative, thimerosal, in vaccines. The government has said in a report by the Institute of Medicine, IOM to you, going on, in a report in 2004, it basically said, do not pursue susceptibility groups. Don't look for those patients, those children who may be vulnerable. I really take issue with that conclusion. The reason they didn't want to look for those susceptibility groups was because they were afraid if they found them, however big or small they were, that they would scare the public away. First of all, I think the public's smarter than that. I think the public values vaccines. But more importantly, I don't think you should ever turn your back on any scientific hypothesis because you're afraid of what it might show. If you read the 2004 report, i.e. the MMR study, okay, if you read the 2004 report and converse with a few of my colleagues, hence the ones that know the truth, who believe this still to be the case, there is a completely expressed concern that they don't want to pursue a hypothesis because the hypothesis could be damaging to public health community at large by scaring people. I don't believe the truth ever scares people. And if it does have a certain edge to it, then that's the obligation of those who are delivering those facts to do it in a responsible way so you don't terrify the public. One never should shy away from science. One should never shy away from getting causality information in a setting in which you can test it. Populations do not test causality. They test associations. You have to go into the laboratory. You have to do designed research studies in animals. What we're seeing is the bulk of the population, vaccines are safe. Vaccines are safe. But there may be the susceptibility group. The fact that there is concern that you don't want to know that susceptibility group is a real disappointment to me. If you know that susceptibility group, you can save those children. If you turn your back on the notion that there's a susceptibility group, that means that you are, what can I say, end quote. Now that was a rather long quote from Dr. Bernadine Healy, who again resigned from the National Institute of Health. One moment. I'm looking at the time. I'm limited on my time. So we had the federal reaction to the rise in autism. It was an oversight committee federal hearing. I want to play some of the clips from that. Let me look up here. I have a lot of clips on here. We'll start with this one, and we'll carry on.
We have been checking into all the financial records of the people at the FDA, HHS, and CDC. Do you believe anybody who's getting funds from Merck or any of the other pharmaceutical companies
Dr. Colleen
should be on advisory
CDC.
panels that are making judgments about pharmaceuticals coming from those companies?
We'll answer.
Or do you believe that's a conflict of interest?
I think that's a difficult question to answer.
Dr. Boyle, for your information, at a public meeting in Brick Township in January of 1997, and you should know this, with CDC and others present, several audience members asked about the vaccines and the possible autism link, and they asked that that be checked. And I submit that maybe, just maybe, it's because the pharmaceutical company that manufactures it had some influence on the people that were in that meeting, and they said, hey, we don't want to get into that. And if that's the case, that's damn near criminal.
Chairman.
Mr. Long is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And today we have referred to, people on the panel, people up here have referred to Nurse 1 and Nurse 2. And these are two young women that have dedicated their lives to helping other people, sick people. And to refer to them as Nurse 1 and Nurse 2 just doesn't set well with me. It's kind of reminiscent of Dr. Seuss, Thing 1 and Thing 2. These are not things. So, for the record, I'd like to state that the first nurse to contract Ebola was Nina Pham. And the second nurse was Amber Joy Vinson. These are young women with families. I know one in particular has a fiancé. And so I think that it would serve us well to remember that these are human beings that have dedicated, young women that have dedicated...
Is autism becoming an epidemic in the United States? Well, according to the CDC, 1 out of every 88 people will be on the autistic spectrum. In fact, if you look even harder at the numbers, 1 out of every 54 boys will have autism. Watch this amazing clip from back in 2012.
Thank you, and thank you for calling this hearing. Autism is becoming a growing epidemic in the United States, and it definitely needs to be addressed. And I want to compliment, really, Congressman Burton for his leadership. He's not here now. I think is he here? Yeah, and for being the chairman of this committee and doing such a fine job. But you have really focused on this, and I think you've made some progress. And I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue and so many others, and express my gratitude to you and how much I've enjoyed working with you. Now, the numbers that he pointed out earlier, that it used to be 1 in 10,000 kids got autism. It's now 1 in 88. And I'd like to ask Dr. Boyle, why? And I don't want to hear that we have better detection. We have better detection, but detection would not account for a jump from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 88. That is a huge, huge, huge jump. What other factors could be part of making that happen besides better detection? Take better detection off the table. I agree we have better detection, but it doesn't account for those numbers.
So just to put it in context, better detection is accounting for some of it. Like
right, I know
Mark
some,
said.
but what other factors? I don't want to hear what other factors.
Our surveillance program